Two separate political thriller series with the same title came out in April. Both center around a female protagonist trying to defuse an international crisis. On this podcast, we're looking at the first installment of The Diplomat, the American TV show on Netflix created by Deborah Cahn, starring Keri Russell, not the BBC show starring Sophie Rundle. It's April 26th, and you're listening to today's episode.
There's a show that's starring Sophie Rundle, and then there's a show that's starring Keri Russell.
So you know Sophie Rundle from Peaky Blinders, right?
No, I didn't know the name.
Oh,
They just sound so similar.
It's the same exact show, except one is a British version, and it's not actually the same exact show. It's about a UK ambassador who is in Spain, I think, when something goes down. My whole point is we're not going to talk about that one. Basically, we're dealing with an incident where there's a hostile attack on a British vessel. A seasoned diplomat, Kate Weiler, assumes a new role at the UK that puts her skills and her marriage to the test. It's called the Cinderella Ring. You watched it. How long was the episode?
About 50 minutes.
About 50 minutes. Let's kick this off with a game. This is a political thriller, right?
Yep.
And so this game is called Was It West Wing? It consists of 3 basic trivia and then a bunch of multiple choice answers of different shows that this show is that The Diplomat has either been compared to or that is closely related to the West Wing. All right, so the set was supposedly so realistic that studio tour groups are not permitted inside the sound stages where the show was filmed due to the White House security concerns. It was either House of Cards, West Wing, 1600 Penn, Scandal, or Designated Survivor.
I'm gonna go with the West Wing, just because it seems like
so
Aaron
it was
Sorkin,
West Wing.
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin. I took his master class. It seems like he was very, very concerned with accuracy whenever he was dealing with that type of show.
And the person who created this show also worked as, I think, producer, writer, and maybe even executive producer on the West Wing
for the first 4 seasons, because those are the only seasons that Aaron Sorkin wrote. I know.
Oh, I do not know exactly which season. She's also worked on Grey's Anatomy and Homeland, so she's done a bunch of politics and drama.
Okay.
And then the next question, one of the many shows that are based off an original British BBC show. That is a tongue twister. It's either Veep, The Night Agent, The Diplomat, or West Wing.
What was the first one you said?
Veep.
I'm just going to go with Veep, yeah.
And you're right, it was based off The Thick of It.
Because the Night Agent just came out. I didn't think it was going to be The Diplomat, and that doesn't sound like West Wing.
You didn't think it was going to be The
either.
Diplomat, even though I just stated how there was a BBC show called The Diplomat.
For some reason, I was very suspicious about the recent shows.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that makes sense. And then the last question I have for you is, which 2 series shared the same Oval Office set? Okay?
Okay.
House of Cards and Designated Survivor, West Wing and Commander-in-Chief. You know what Commander-in-Chief is, right?
I remember, the ads for it.
It was the first, or not the first show, but the first show showing a woman president, or that was the premise of the entire show.
Right, yeah.
I think Gina Davis from League of Their Own was in that. And then also Veep and 1600 Penn. So it's just out of those 3.
Oh, so it's not even The Diplomat.
Yeah.
I will go with, because they were both comedies, Veep and 1600 Penn.
That is incorrect. It was actually House of Cards and Designated Survivor.
Oh, wow.
Completely different networks.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going to break the ice into this episode. It's really weird that with Keri Russell, that it's been 10 years since The Americans came out on TV.
Yeah, since it premiered. I was afraid you were going to say since it finished.
Yeah. Not only that, but Obama was a big fan.
Really? I didn't even know that.
They were invited to the White House, and apparently Obama, I know he was a big fan of Veep at one time, but apparently he was also just watching a lot of American TV shows on his off time.
He always comes out, I think, every year with the shows that are his favorite, like a top 10 list.
Does he? Does he release them on YouTube with Marquise Brownlee? His top 10?
Marquise Brownlee suddenly doing TV shows and movies.
I could see Obama and Marquise Brownlee hanging out.
I think it's important to note that The Diplomat is not an action show. And I thought it was because when I typed into Netflix, the 3 shows that popped up next to it were The Night Agent, Treason, and then The Recruit. And I
All
was
political
like,
thrillers, but not as action-packed, right?
Yeah, not nearly.
So Keri Russell isn't like pulling from her spy stuff, and she's not like shooting people yet?
Nothing like that. Yeah. In fact, the only action we get is at the very beginning of the episode. They kind of show us the title card, and then it was nicely transitioned into the big blue sea, and we see a aircraft carrier, and literally within the first couple seconds, this aircraft carrier has an explosion, and that was just
Has an explosion or it explodes?
Well, no, it doesn't explode completely. It's not like a huge explosion. It just has an explosion at part of
So
the
Michael
ship.
Bay would have seen this and he would have passed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming it had something to do with the budget. But then we get cut right away to Keri Russell's character, Kate Weiler. She's the ambassador, and that's what this whole entire show is about. She needs to go to London because they're afraid that this could start a war because London was where the attack took place, where the aircraft carrier was.
Yeah, can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this show is called The Diplomat, right? Because there are 16,000 diplomats from the U.S. around the world, right? That's a lot of diplomats. But there's only 194 ambassadors because you can only really have one ambassador per country.
And there are actually two ambassadors.
Oh,
that
it's
show up.
generally one per country.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, but what I'm trying to get to is that this is called The Diplomat.
Yeah.
But she's an ambassador.
Yeah, and so
do you just think that the title, they were like, well, ambassador doesn't make her sound as cool or something? Like, it's weird that they would choose the title that's less special.
when
you know?
I hear ambassador, it just it sounds like a PBS drama.
Ambassador? Oh, so you
sounds-
think it's too boring?
Yeah, and even though
Diplomat doesn't.
Well, no, Diplomat feels like there's going to be some complex story
But
behind
she's like,
it.
but she's like the king of the diplomats. Does that make sense? Like she's the main diplomat in charge because the ambassador is still a diplomat. They're just the one in control of everybody else. They're the one in control of the embassy, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I was going to say that this could be compared to something like The Crown in terms of, like, the slow pacing. So maybe Ambassador would actually work better for the TV show. But
Okay.
here, at least Diplomat, it's just like the recruit or the night agent. There's always
to me,
the...
it's like if you were to call a program baseball player and it only dealt. Well, no, this is terrible. Like in order to become an ambassador, you actually, or most of the time, have to get approved by the Senate. And also, it's like you're appointed directly from the president.
Interesting.
If you remember House of Cards, they would talk about how the biggest donors would be, that would be their bargaining chip.
I only ever
in order
saw
to-
the first two seasons. of
I
House
think
of
it was
Cards.
in the first
Oh,
two
was it?
seasons where they were like running for president or something, and then like they're like offering up ambassadorships for people who are like giving them the most donations or helping them out the most.
Actually, that's a nice segue because in this show, much like in, I think it was either season 1 or season 2 of House of Cards, Kevin Spacey's character, I forgot, Frank Underwood, he's being vetted to be vice president, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that is a huge thing in this show. Actually, one of the reasons why Kate Weiler is even heading to London or England is because they're trying to see the vice president. There's going to be an article released about her, and they're going to be stepping down for whatever reason, and they're trying to see if Kate Weiler can kind of handle herself under pressure.
Yeah, and the pressure being that you had just said that this there was that big explosion or the tiny explosion.
It was, I mean, it's supposed to be a big explosion in the TV show, and they're thinking that it's Iran that did it. For some reason, Kate Weiler at the very beginning of the episode seems to really not think that was Iran, think that it was possibly just somewhere else. But then they, like, during the middle of the episode, they don't really give any reason as to why she would have changed her mind, but that's kind of the narrative they're going with, that it was Iran. It was a lot of different, like, kind of, like you were saying, foreign affairs and things like that. But yeah, Kate Weiler and Hal Weiler, we learn Hal Weiler is her husband, and also whenever she goes to London, they call him Ambassador Weiler. So
Yeah,
both of
you
them
didn't see him
called the same
before
name.
this year, but like he was in Kaleidoscope too. He played the guy who owned the bank vault.
Yeah,
think.
I have to be
Yeah,
honest.
Rufus Sewell, and he was also in Man in the High Castle. He played like the main Nazi.
His character, it's funny, he was bad guys in those, because here he's supposed to
Oh, he
be
wasn't-
like,
yeah, okay,
he's
yeah.
supposed to be a protagonist here, but I just I did not like his character. He's my least favorite character out of
Is
the whole
he really
entire
supposed
show.
to be a protagonist? Because I thought like she's the main character of the show. Aren't you supposed to be on her side? And this is about like a troubled marriage.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're supposed to definitely feel for him, though. But the thing was that his storyline was so boring, and I think one of the things that made his storyline so boring is that he's bored throughout, like, most of this episode. That's literally his storyline. He's stuck in this big house when they get to London.
It's like the Gilded
This
Age.
yeah, I mean, this house is huge, by the way. It's the size of an embassy. Like, this thing is insane.
Well, it's not a house. It is basically an embassy, right?
Yeah, Yeah, and he has like all these guards and all these places to go to, but literally he's just calling Kate Weiler being like, hey, I'm bored, I need help, I don't really know what to do.
Yeah, I think the house itself is called the Winfield House. This is when they're in Great Britain, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And so that actually is a place. They didn't shoot there because they couldn't, because it's actually in usage still. The person who's the ambassador in UK right now is Jane D. Hartley. But the fact that I found out was that Barbara Hutton, who was like a really famous philanthropist and like actress and stuff, and she bought this property, and then when like she gave it to Truman, who used it as like the U.S. Embassy, and from then on out, that's what it's been used as.
So just people from the U.S. always.
Yeah, but that property itself is super duper famous in London, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's just hanging out there. And their jobs are supposed to be like competitive, right? So she is off doing her own thing, and he's kind of feeling for the first time in his life like she has a more important gig than him.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of see that that's not really the case by the end of the episode.
Why is that?
Because they're going to be getting a divorce. That's something.
Oh, that's already confirmed by the first episode?
By the very end of the first episode, yeah.
Do you see that wear down throughout the episode, or is it kind of...
there was strange things, like you see Hal, and it seems like at times he's just hitting on his wife, and his wife isn't really taking any of the compliments seriously, and then like by the very end of the episode, Stuart Hayford, that's kind of Kate Weiler's right hand, who's supposed to kind of be guiding her throughout the whole thing. I think he lives in London as well.
You've seen him in Away. He was in the Hilary Swank show.
I wouldn't have remembered him.
He was also the guy who died in Let the Right One in the first episode, Frank.
Oh, from the TV series.
Yeah,
okay.
You remember the one who they took the blood from?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's completely different character here.
Got it.
Yeah, no, he's speaking to, or he actually figures out that they're not sleeping in the same bed, Kate and Hal, and then he's like, if they're not sleeping in the same bed, they must have a troubled marriage. He goes to speak to Hal at the very end of the episode, and it turns out that they're having a divorce. I didn't really like that storyline either, because it didn't make much sense. I felt like it was added drama that was really unneeded. We already saw that like Kate wasn't a huge fan or really didn't like hanging out with Hal anyways. So I felt like the fact that he even came to London, I felt they could have just kept his character away from this show, cut it out completely, and I didn't feel like you would have missed anything. Because this show has a very slow pace. It's 50 minutes, and that was fine in the first 20 or so when you're kind of figuring out what exactly is needing to happen. Kate needs to speak to the president's telling her that she needs to go to London. When they're setting up the basic premise, the show is doing a fine job with that, and Keri Russell is always good in whatever she usually is in. But yeah, so when it was setting up its actual plot, when she's like going to London, when you're learning all kind of the jargon and all the things that she's going to have to do, I thought that one of the best things that the show did was they're trying to give her a good public image, but she doesn't want to do any of that stuff. They're trying to get her on magazines covers and give her a lot of glamour just so that the public perception of her being an ambassador in London is really good. And she's like, no, I'm trying to figure out what exactly happened, what this attack really meant, and who did it.
I'm trying to... There have been... Like, Hillary Clinton ran for president, but she did more than just... She was more than just an ambassador. She was also, like, Secretary of State, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, I know Benjamin Franklin at one point was an ambassador, but I don't remember anybody just jumping straight into the political, like, presidency run as a real nominee, just having a ambassadorship.
Well, she's not running for it. She's just trying to be vice president. I think that there's other candidates.
And then from vice president, then she can be. And so by the end of the series,
right? Yeah,
it'll still be called the Diplomat, but she'll be the president of the United States. All right. So does she get anywhere close to a lead on what ended up happening to this thing?
By the end of the episode, not really, actually.
So where are you left?
It's more... Okay, so the chief of staff, I think his name was Gannon. There was a couple of different people that we learned are chief of staff positions in this episode, but Gannon is the main one that she takes order from. He really wants her in Kabul, but then the president decided to bring her to London again.
Do you see the president?
VP process. Yeah, you see him for a quick second, or I think at least
Michael McKean from Better Call Saul?
Right, you see him in the Oval Office. He's actually the one that tells her to go to London. And originally, Kate doesn't even think it's her that's being sent to London. She thinks it's going to be Hal.
Yeah.
But so that's, I think...
How does he do as a president, though? Because there have been so many iterations of different types of presidents, and he's just supposed to be a different one.
We literally only see him in one scene.
Oh, so he's just like, hey, what's up? You're going to London.
Basically,
Got it.
It was almost just, I think, to kind of introduce him for later episodes.
Do you meet the Prime Minister then?
Yes, you do. And who plays him?
So his name in the show is Nicole Trowbridge, right?
Yeah.
And his real name is Rory Kinnear, and he's from the Bond films.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was also a main character in the Our Flag Means Death, which came out this year.
That's where I know.
And he also, I think, fucked the pig in the Black Mirror episode.
In the first episode.
So I think he was also Prime Minister there.
Wait, really? Actually, yeah.
Yeah, that would have been the Prime Minister.
No, I definitely know him from the Bond films. When I saw him, I was trying to place him, and I just couldn't. But that actually leads to a lot of tension between Kate and, as I was talking about, the Secretary of State that usually gives her orders, Gannon. She's at this the place where the Prime Minister usually meets with all the people, and she's taken away by, I think, either the Prime Minister's right hand or something like that, because they have more information on the attack. They really do think that's Iran. It turns out that the aircraft carrier, it's drifting more and more towards there. And before Kate can really speak to even Gannon, I keep on calling him that because that's how they refer to him, but I think it's Miguel Gannon in the episode. The right hand of the Prime Minister is basically like, yeah, I'm actually going to alert the Prime Minister right now. And then Kate speaks with the Prime Minister before Gannon, which was kind of an interesting power play because Gannon gets really angry about that. He doesn't even want her in London. So the fact that she's speaking with the Prime Minister and telling him details and not alerting him before the Prime Minister, especially when she's from the U.S., kind of was an interesting... I felt like it was the best part of the episode because I understood it the most, but it also had the most layers to it. Yeah. Because Gannon starts to get really mad so much so that he slows her security clearances, and she can't do as much of the job as she wants to. And then there's even a tense exchange between the two of them at one point. That when the show focused on, I felt like the actual premise, I thought that was good.
Well, the actual premise is confusing because there's a lot of stuff but when you're saying that, when it focuses directly on the politics.
Yes.
When it ignores the relationship drama.
But it didn't do that enough, I felt like.
But this is a person who created not created, but has worked on Grey's Anatomy as an executive producer. So obviously they wanted to implement a mix of both. If you talk about Homeland, there's always the drama in there as well.
Yeah, but
West Wing also has drama. There's got to be that human element to balance it out to keep people involved.
They had that type of human drama almost with the fact that she's not going to do the Vogue magazine covers and the public perception and the glamour. It's just that perception. Right. It's just the fact that Hal is in this show that I really did not enjoy. By the very end of the episode, I should mention that Kate Weiler ends up just kind of giving in. In fact, it was after the exchange with Gannon. Part of the reason is that she doesn't want to upset her base, so she decides to do the magazine covers and everything like that.
Oh, so you get to see a scene of just shoots of her posing for different things?
It felt most like The Crown because I remember, or at least I think we talked about it in the previous
There was an explosion
seasons.
in that episode too.
Yes, there was an explosion on a boat, in fact. But you're able to see her. She's in a carriage. She's waving to people. They're taking magazine covers, and that's when Stuart Hayford decides to have a little chat in the embassy building with Hal. And by the very end of the episode, I felt like they just kind of threw this in. It was the most night agent I felt that the show got. Because Hal decides to go into a limousine. He's speaking to one of the people who he thinks works for Kate, or at least works for her team. Yeah. And then he gets injected in the neck with a syringe.
So Magnum PI.
Almost. But then apparently he's being kidnapped by the very end of the episode. It kind of came out of nowhere, especially when you were seeing all these politics and all these relationship dramas go into play. And then at the very end of the episode, they just decide to kidnap the husband. I'm assuming that's the reason why they wanted to bring the husband to London, just so that they could add, again, more drama. Overall...
Well, it sounds like he's the damsel in distress at this point.
Yeah, I would say that he is. And I mean, just the show to me, it didn't grab me as much as it wanted to. I still think it definitely passes because there's enough interesting scenes interspliced throughout the show. But overall, I felt like it just had a slow pace, and it really wasn't that much convincing. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, all right. Do you want to hear the other reviews?
Yeah, go ahead.
8.1 on IMDb. It's mainly got positive reviews, but I will say this. So The Guardian gave it 4 stars, but it says after a slightly turgid opening episode. So from first impressions, it looks like that first episode might not be indicative of what the show becomes. The Diplomat becomes a hugely enjoyable ride, and Russell rules the show. Everyone around her is brilliant addition and support. So yeah, you get a lot of positive reviews. I think it has a 75 on Metacritic. Collider gave it the biggest
75.
negative.
So that's a high score, I think, for a TV show.
Mostly positive reviews.
Yeah,
Collider gave it, I think, the biggest negative one. It says, go watch Americans again instead.
You know what's so funny? Collider just feels like it's constantly coming out with negative reviews. I know you weren't a big fan of the Waco show, but they hated that show when I was doing reviews for it.
It said it was too flippant, that there was a hollow theatrical performance based on shaky dramatic developments that only end up undercutting the tension that it seemed to be going for. I had read that it's another walk and talk, so there's a lot of fast-moving pace dialogue, and so it's a talkie. And usually I don't point out user reviews, but there was an Amazon comment that made me laugh, so I do want to say that one if I can find it. It says, every other scene, Keri Russell goes from having casual, messy, wavy hair to flat ironed. Unfortunately, the haircut inconsistency affects the overall quality of the series. And I thought, I kid you not. So I read that and I was like, that's funny. And then I went on to like Reddit and I went on to all these other sites that were talking about the show. And so many people, primarily women, were so obsessed with her hair changing. And I was just curious, had you noticed that in the show? I didn't
notice it at all.
They were like, they wanted her to take a shower. It was so strange.
There was not one time throughout this entire show where I focused on her hair.
A lot of people had a problem with it, but they said the show was great. Otherwise, yeah.
I will say the show tries to have humor, and sadly when it tries to have humor, it really doesn't work as well. There's like a whole weird scene where Kate Weiler is trying to get her husband to smell her armpit.
Why?
Like, because she's trying for like the magazine cover and see if she looks good. And there's definitely one-liners throughout the show, but they didn't come off as like as funny as
what would you
like
compare it to
like
mostly out of all the so there's West Wing, you said The Night Agent, but not really because it doesn't have the action. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, they say it's kind of like a Tom Clancy novel.
This doesn't actually, the strange thing is it doesn't feel like a streaming network, because usually streaming networks have the action that you're talking about. This didn't feel like a Netflix show. It felt like something that you usually see on CBS, kind of like the Madam Secretaries.
But still good enough that you said it passed.
Yeah, it passes.
So it's smart. And then, so the title actually does make a little bit of sense since it's called the Cinderella thing. They're kind of like spoofing her up. They're trying to make her into this better version of herself so that she can run for office later on. Yeah,
there's a scene where she's speaking to, I think, Hal, because this is when she's first learning that Gannon is kind of slowing her security clearance and trying to get her out of London, and so she can't really do her job. And she says, you know who they can't fire? Cinderella. So she says Cinderella in the episode.
Yeah. So I just I saw some interviews with Keri Russell, and one of the answers that seemed to kind of stand out was, please let me get COVID so that I do not have to do another fast walk and talk. I can't talk about Iranian diplomacy one more day. I don't have the brain space for all this political leaders and acronyms. And guess what? My wish came true. I did get COVID and I got too sick, and so it was a bad wish. Other than that, that's mostly, it is topical since that embassy in Sudan was just cleared out for the Americans. But other than that, I think we've kind of talked about the show. And if you have anything else to add about the pilot?
No, that's about it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.